So MG Rod back with you. Today we're finally working on the trailer. This thing has been a workhorse for us, but it's needing some help. As you can see, fenders are in pretty bad shape now, and they have been for a while. We've been talking about replacing the fenders on this thing for a couple of years, and was actually getting ready to do something about actually changing them out about a year and a half ago, right as I found out that they were buying the whole block that I was on, and I was going to have to end up moving and finding a new house, and that became priority to find a new place to live and get a new shop set up. Now that the shop is mostly set up, and the last load of material I went and got with on this thing, I got to the yard to pick up the lumber, and all the wiring had came out from underneath it and was dragging behind it. So I had no lights whatsoever. So it's time. So this is what we're making our fenders out of here. Now I've had a part-time job. I've had, at a company that I've been working for since the mid-90s, where I've just been working part-time for quite a while now, like one day a week. Was going out of business, lost their lease on their building, and before we cleaned the place out, we had some steel sitting there that I was able to get, and we bent it up into some fenders here. Now this stuff's a lot heavier than it needs to be for fenders. It only needs to be 16 gauge. But then when it's only 16 or 18 gauge, they rust out pretty quickly. And stepping on them, you can bend them a little bit. This is actually overkill at 12 gauge. Well, no problem being able to step on it. I'm not gonna have any problem rusting out anytime that we have the thing. Yes, it's overkill, but the price was right on this metal. It was available, and I was able to get it done. And now we're gonna put them on here. Well, as you can see, they were pretty bad. That come off surprisingly easy. I don't even think we really needed to go time-lapse on that one. It went so fast. But now all I gotta do is get in here, just clean up the edges here where everything was welded, get all that cleaned up, and then we can start measuring out to actually shape the new fenders. So now when we go to make our fenders here, we're not going to do round fenders like this time. What we're going to do is have it come out 45 and then 45. So to figure out what we need, we're going to cheat. We're going to take this and put it so that it ends up on the end here, and put a straight edge across here so that we get the same measurement on both sides, which is about 10 3/8. So then what I can do is get a measurement between 10 3/8 and 10 3/8. That'll be my straight line here. Then we'll make a mark here, do the same thing on the other end, and then find the center point. And then that's where we can start with laying out our new fender. All right, so I got a mark here where I lined it up this end, and then I got a mark over here where I lined up this end. Measure between the two, which was, let's see, what was it again? 27 3/4. So I found the very center of that. So then we measure from here to there, which is going to be obviously 13 7/8. And then we add 12 1/8 to that, because our dimension here was 10 3/8 for our bend. So what did I say that was? 28? So 13 7/8, 14, so it's 26. So will mark the center line of our fender and then go 26 inches either way for our first bends.
That's what I would do.
So what I did, I just started with 8-foot material because the old fenders were like 7'8", and I just cut these at 8 foot. Actually, I think maybe the material was already 8 foot long, so we just left it there. We bent these in the press brake before the shop shut down. But I got my center line here. We went over 26 inches either way, measured across from here to here, and close enough measurements, just 4 5/8. It's more like 4 11, but whatever. Good enough for what we're doing. Measured 14 5/8 here and over here. Transferred those lines down, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from here. I'm going to take an angle finder here, which is not the one I want, but it's the one I have here. And we're going to cut across here 22.5 degrees and cut wedges out of both sides of these. Since we're doing a 45 degree, 22.5 either way, or 22.5 either way will give us our 45. Well, I don't know if you can tell in the time lapse, there's one thing you want to be mindful of when you're doing stuff like this, is I had this horse on the other side of where I was cutting it here, and my helper here, as he was holding it, he was putting downward pressure on it, just not just holding it. So, and as we start cutting it, once I got here, it just tried to close it up, caught the wheel and broke it. So yeah, you definitely don't want to do that. I should have actually had this over here to make sure that wouldn't have happened, but I didn't realize he was putting downward pressure. I thought he was just keeping it from sliding around. But you need to keep mindful of that when you're working with cutoff wheels. That stuff can happen, and those can hurt when it hits you. And you could end up in the hospital too. So be careful, kids. So now what I did here was I cut piece of 2x8 scrap from doing the mezzanine, just a little narrower than the inside width of this. And I'll set that on top of there, get this lined up to that line, and then we'll just push down on it until we get it where we want it. Which is going to be a little difficult being 12 gauge, but that's the basic idea of how we're going to do it. I'm going to have to clamp something on here for a little bit of extra force. So I took another piece of the 2x8 scrap. What I did was I put it on the bottom side because sticking up in here, clamping in here gives me the leverage on this. And we just go ahead and push that down. And then what we can do is we'll measure this for the 45 and then tack weld this together and then move up and do the same for all the rest of them. And we don't really need the extension piece on this because it'll just go. Actually, what I'm going to end up doing here is checking this, getting this 45 first, tacking it, and doing the other one on the top. And then I'll take a measurement across there and make sure it's even from here to here on the measurements, and maybe even wrap a ratchet strap around it if I have to get it there. So it looks like my cuts were actually accurate enough, but all I need to do is make sure it's butting in. Sometimes I'll cut them a little extra deep and then you gotta measure it more. So I go ahead and put this on. Give me some leverage. I'll repeat that on the other side, and then we'll come back and do these. So what I'm doing on this side, got a ratchet strap across here, take a square, and double check that, make sure that looks good. Now this is really close. It's not 100% perfect, but it is close enough for what we're doing here today. And then we just check all four corners. I don't like to do on both sides at the same time. I'll spin around and check this for 90 as well, so make sure we're not pulling it and twisting things. So we just do that on all four corners, and then it'll be ready to weld up. All right, we're ready to weld. Well, it's a little too hot for when I got gas. Being too hot, aren't I? Guess I was a little off. I missed the line by just a little. As I'm getting older, I can't see those as well as I used to. Now I'll weld the outside, and then we can grind and finish off the outside so it looks nice. So before I finish welding it, let's just see how this compares to the fender that's already on this side. So I can hang it down just a little bit more on the back side, which is really kind of what we wanted. And looks like it'll fit. The flap wheel here to finish these off. I went over them real quick with a grinder just to get the worst of it off, and then the flap wheel gives you a nice finish. Are they perfect? No. Do they ought to be? No. I know the guy that owns this trailer, and he'll be thrilled with it just the way it is. So after taking a length measurement from outside to outside, we're within 1/8 of an inch of the old fenders. So I'd say that's pretty good. So now what we're going to do, we got to do the back panel here. So get this laid on here, got it all squared up where I want it, and we're going to make some marks on this, and then we're gonna move those marks in, so we're not cutting it even. It'll be to the inside about 1/4 of an inch. So when they make these fenders for these trailers, they always put this inner panel on the inside flange here and stitch it onto there. Now, one of the single most common reoccurring problems we had on this trailer was this coming loose. And even if we tacked it back together, eventually it would come loose again, partly due to rust and partly due to vibrations. And then these would flop into the tires, causing wear in the sidewalls of the tires. So we are going to put these together a bit differently. We're going to put this panel on the outside here so that it pinches between the fender and the frame, and it can't go anywhere. The welds break, it still can't go anywhere. So now I got the back plate here all cut and put in place. What I did was I made sure that before I took the tires off that the distance between here and the tire was exactly the same, which it is, it's centered up. So then I made marks here to get this centered and clamped it in place. And now this is ready to weld out. Now, since at the moment, I can't actually find any weld through primer. I'm not even sure I have any, but if I do, I can't find it right now. So in those cases like that, a little light coat of etch primer actually works as a very reasonable substitute because it doesn't really interfere much with your welding, and it will do a good job protecting the metal behind there. Now, for those eagle-eyed keyboard warriors out there, you might be getting pretty itchy to say, hey, that trailer has no brakes on it. And you know, you're right. It doesn't have brakes. And we have thought about putting brakes on it. But currently, nothing in the fleet of mine or my close friends that actually work with me in the shop and on the YouTube channel have anything with trailer brakes on it anyway, so we wouldn't really be using them. And of course, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, we're hauling stuff that's 2,500 pounds or less. So we can get away with that. Man, I love welding old rusty metal. Just produces such nice welds. Actually, usually I won't have to grind my welds, but in this case, I want to make sure they're nice and flat all across the top here so it doesn't interfere with this fitting. So I just said, let's just go over everything, make sure everything's flat and smooth, and we'll call that good. So now I got to put the fender up in place and get it lined up. So the hardest part of this is actually clamping it in place. You got to have some pretty deep clamps, and it helps to have a helper to hold it, which I don't currently have at the moment, but I got it. And I just realized that I actually screwed up in cutting the back piece. I drew the line on the inside, and I meant to add an inch to it, and I didn't. So I don't have any other metal to put in there. So we're just gonna roll with it and make it work. So this is what happens when you let your train of thought get completely derailed and you don't go back and double check yourself. My original thought was when I was going to mark it on the outside and take a 1/4 inch off. Well, I ended up marking it on the inside, and I meant to add an inch, but instead I still took that 1/4 inch off. So now I got this nice big gnarly gap there, and we don't want that because it'll sling mud and water through there. So to make the best of it, I'm just welding it up. Now, welding a gap like that is, not the easiest thing to do, but you can do it, and just not the smoothest of welds because you can't control it so much, but hey, it is what it is. So I got that welded on and then put the last little brace in here. So that's one side done. Now all I gotta do is rinse and repeat and do the same thing on the other side.